Welcome to the deep dive. You know those sneaky, uninvited guests that pop up in English words? Silent letters.
Mm.
Like that K just hanging out at night, or the P in psychology, or I don't know, the S in island.
Oh, yeah.
Ever look at them and just think, seriously? What are you doing here?
Absolutely. It's a really common language head scratcher, isn't it?
It is.
You're like trying to spell knife and that K is just sitting there,
Right.
or debt suddenly grows a B. Apparently straight from Latin.
Yeah,
And kernel, I mean, the spelling and the way we say it feel like they're from completely different planets.
totally different universes.
Basically.
Exactly. Well, today that's exactly what we're digging into for you.
Good.
This deep dive is all about cracking that code, the silent letter code. We want to sort of unearth the history behind them, why they exist,
Right.
and maybe even give you a simple trick or two to, boost your spelling confidence.
Always helpful.
Yeah. Our goal is that, next time you see words like receipt or Wednesday or even Bologna, you'll have this sense of, okay, I think I did this now.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What is the deal with English and all these silent letters?
Yeah, what is it?
Well, it turns out there isn't just one simple reason. It's more like several layers, historical layers.
Okay.
We can generally group them into maybe four key reasons why they're there.
4 reasons. All right, let's unpack the first one.
Yeah.
You mentioned uh, historical leftovers.
Yeah.
That sounds like letters that were once useful but are now just...
Lingering. Yeah, precisely. Think of it like, seeing a faded outline of an old doorway in a building.
Hmm.
It's not used now, but it tells you something about how things used to be.
Right, a story.
Exactly. Many silent letters, they were actually fully pronounced way back when. Take night.
Okay.
In Old English, which is a much, much earlier form of the language, both the K and the ni sound,
Mm.
they were spoken. Something like nicht, you'd hear it.
Wow.
Yeah. Over time, how we spoke changed, naturally. But the spelling, well, it was already kind of set. It just stuck around.
So the sound disappeared, but the letters didn't.
Right. It shows how the soundscape of English has really shifted, but our written map hasn't always kept up.
Saying that K in night now feels so weird.
It does.
And it's not just really old words, is it? I mean, even a word like talk, that seems simple, but it has that silent L.
Exactly. That L in talk that used to be pronounced.
Really?
Yeah. And what's fascinating is in some dialects over in the UK, it still is.
No way.
Yeah. It just shows how language evolves, differently in different places, different speeds. But the written form can be much more stubborn.
Huh. Okay, so historical leftovers, reason number 1. We used to say them, now we don't, but the spelling's still there. What's the next layer? What's reason 2?
So the second reason is what we could maybe playfully call fancy pants snobbery.
Huh. Okay, I like the sound of that.
Sometimes letters were actually put into words on purpose to make them look, well, more scholarly.
Often trying to link them back to Latin or maybe Greek, even if those letters were never, ever meant to be pronounced in English.
So it's like linguistic posturing, trying to look smart.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A bit of linguistic showing off.
Give us an example of this fancy pants move.
Okay, a classic one is the word debt.
Debt. Okay.
It got that B in the spelling purely because the Latin word it comes from is debitum.
Debitum.
Right. But the English way of saying it never actually had a B sound. It was added, visually to show off its Latin roots.
So English was trying to flex its classical education. Any other examples of this? Linguistic peacocking.
Oh, sure. Think about island.
Island, yeah, that risk feels random.
Totally random. It got that silent S, basically, because the related French word, isle, I-S-L-E, had one.
Oh, okay.
Again, the S wasn't pronounced in the English word, but it sort of got tacked on, probably because of that French spelling influence.
Right. Okay, so we've got echoes from the past and deliberate attempts to sound smart. What's the third sneaky reason for silent letters? The third one involves just natural shifts in pronunciation. How we say words, it evolves over time, organically. Sometimes sounds just fade away, they disappear from common speech. But like we saw with the leftovers, the spelling doesn't always catch up.
Wednesday always seems like the perfect example here, that it looks like it should be loud and proud.
Exactly. Wednesday comes from Woden's Day, the Norse god, Woden.
Right, Wogan.
And originally that wood was definitely heard, Woden's Day. But over centuries, the pronunciation softened, that sound just vanished for most people.
She's gone.
But the spelling stayed. It's like a little snapshot of how it used to be said.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned something before about printers. Flemish printers adding an H somewhere.
Yes. The word ghost is a really interesting one.
Ghost. Ghost.
Right. That H wasn't originally part of the English spelling at all.
Really?
No, it was added later by Flemish printers who were working in England. They had their own spelling habits from their language.
So it wasn't even an English thing. It was imported.
Exactly. Sometimes a silent letter isn't even a ghost of an English sound, but something brought in from outside. It shows how, external things can shape even really basic words.
Wow. So it's not always English itself, but sometimes just the quirks of the people writing it down or printing it. That's a great detail.
Yeah.
Okay, now for reason number 4, what's the story there?
The final big reason is what we might call loan word chaos.
Loan word chaos. I like it.
English, as we know, loves borrowing words. It's a champion borrow.
Oh yeah, a total magpie.
Totally. And when we adopt words from other languages, sometimes we change the pronunciation, like drastically, but we keep a spelling that's still kind of similar to the original. And that mismatch creates some really baffling silent letters.
Okay, Colonel's got to be the poster child for this, right?
Oh, absolutely. It comes from Italian, looks a bit French, maybe.
And sounds nothing like it's spelled.
Exactly. Colonel comes from the Italian Cornello.
Cornello. Okay.
But the English pronunciation somehow shifted to sound much more like a French word. Coronel, Coronel. So we completely dropped those middle sounds, but the spelling, it stubbornly holds on to bits of the Italian original.
It's like English went shopping in the International Language Store and just ignored the instructions on the box.
Aha, that's a good way to put it.
Got another example of this global word mashup.
Sure, think about Bologna.
Ah, yes. The lunch meat.
Right, spelled Bologna, reflecting its Italian city origin.
Mm-hmm.
But how do most English speakers say it? Bologna.
Bologna, yeah.
We completely changed the vowel sounds. It's like a linguistic passport that got stamped very differently at customs.
These 4 reasons, historical leftovers, snobbery, sound shifts, and loanword chaos, they really paint this picture of English as, this constantly changing, grabbing language.
That's a great summary. It's this organic, sometimes messy process.
And it leads to some funny moments, right? Like that listener story.
Oh, yes. This listener shared that they pronounced salmon with a really clear olive sound. For years.
Oh, no. Salmon.
Salmon. Apparently their friend still gives them a hard time about it. Playfully, of course.
Of course.
But it just shows, doesn't it? Even for people who grew up speaking English, these silent letters can still be tricky and maybe a bit embarrassing sometimes.
Oh, I can totally relate. We've all been there, I'm sure. Okay, so now we get why they exist. Let's zoom in on some of the usual suspects, the repeat offenders. Which silent letters cause the most trouble?
Right. There are definitely a few regulars. First up, probably the most famous, the silent E at the end of words.
The bossy E.
The bossy E, often called that for a very good reason.
Yeah, the one that, jumps over the consonant and tells the vowel before it to say its name.
Exactly.
Like in bite versus bit. That E completely changes the I sound, even though you don't hear the G itself.
Precisely. It's a super important silent letter for signaling vowel pronunciation. Then we've got what you might call the shadow squad.
Ooh, I like that. Shadow squad.
The silent K, G, and W that often show up at the start of words.
Like knee, gnaw, right. Yeah. Why are they there?
Well, back to those historical leftovers again. Those initial K, G, W sounds, they used to be pronounced. We think their silence now is often linked to Viking influence on Old English.
So we can blame the Vikings for my spelling trouble with night.
In a way, yes. They left their mark on the spelling, even if we don't hear it anymore.
Amazing. Okay, who else is in this silent letter gang?
Well, we also have the sneaky B, H, and P.
Sneaky.
They pop up in places like doubt or hour or psychology.
Right.
And these often tie back to those Latin or Greek roots we talked about, like the B in debt originally coming from debitum.
Okay, makes sense. And then there's the silent U, which always feels a bit weird in words like guilt or guest.
That's a good word for it, weird. Or maybe like a linguistic gatecrasher. In many words where U is silent after a G, like guest or guard, it's often a remnant of French influence.
French again.
Yeah. It was originally there partly to signal that the G should have a hard G sound, not a soft J sound, before vowels like E or I. Think of French words like guerre or. The U isn't really heard, but it affects the G.
Okay, that actually helps categorize them in my head. Do we have any, practical tips for actually remembering these patterns?
Yes, definitely. One thing that can be really helpful is to group words by their silent letter combinations.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, for instance, you'll notice that M at the end of a word, like in comb, lamb, thumb, almost always has a silent B.
Right. Comb, lamb, thumb.
Yeah, or words starting with yem, like gnome, knack, sign, that G is typically silent.
Gnome, sign. Okay, I see.
Recognizing those recurring pairs can be a really big help with spelling.
That's a fantastic practical tip. Okay, so now we know the history, the why, and some of the common culprits, the who. But the big question, I think, for everyone listening is, how can we actually guess right more often when we're faced with these?
Yeah, the guessing game. Well, there's no, foolproof magic wand.
Ugh.
I know, sorry. But there are definitely clues, strategies you can use. One of the best is thinking about where the word came from, its origin.
Back to the linguistic detective work. So if a word feels like it might be French or Latin.
Then there's a higher chance it might have a silent letter hiding in there somewhere.
Okay.
Words like honest with the silent H or muscle, silent C, they have those classical roots.
Right.
On the flip side, words that come from older Germanic languages, like Old English, they tend to be a bit more straightforward. What you see is often what you get.
Like house or book.
Exactly. Fewer silent surprises, usually.
That's a really useful rule of thumb. Okay, what else? What else should we look out for?
Pay attention to word endings. Certain common endings are pretty reliable indicators. Like words ending in "alk." Think walk, talk, chalk.
Silent. Yeah.
Or endings like old, could, should, would.
Silent ol again.
Right. But then compare an ending like turation in action or nation, that titchy is definitely pronounced, as part of that shun sound. Whereas titch, like in which or catch, the T is silent. It just reinforces the chip sound.
Ah, okay. So it's about spotting those patterns and knowing the rules for that specific pattern. What about vowels? Do silent letters mess with vowels too?
They definitely do. We already talked about the silent use making the vowel before it long.
Right. Up versus hope.
Exactly. But there are other subtle things. Look at guest versus guess.
Yes, okay.
That silent U in guest isn't really pronounced, but it ensures the G stays hard, like G, not soft like J. So it indirectly affects how we approach the vowel sound that follows.
Wow, okay. These are really useful strategies. We actually had a listener share a really clever little hack they use.
Oh, yeah. What's their trick?
They said when they're making notes or maybe studying vocabulary, they write the silent letters in a different color.
Ooh, that's smart.
Yeah. Apparently that visual difference helps their brain kind of skip over that letter mentally when they're saying the word aloud.
That's brilliant. Very practical. I like that. Anything that makes these feel less daunting is a win.
Definitely. But it's also worth remembering, isn't it, that it's not just learners who struggle. Even native speakers get tripped up sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. It's not just an English learner thing at all.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard native speakers stumble. Sherbet is a classic one.
Oh, yeah. People say sherbet with an extra R.
Exactly. That phantom R. Or espresso. How often do you hear espresso?
All the time. With an X. Drives me nuts.
Me too. That X just appears out of thin air. And what about Arctic?
Yeah, the poor C, it just gets ignored.
Right. It just becomes Arctic for so many people. Like the sea just packed its bags and left.
It did. Took a permanent vacation.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you add in regional differences.
Well, that throws another whole layer on top.
Yeah. Like in the UK, you often hear herb with a silent H. Herb.
Right. Whereas in the U.S., usually it's herb with the H.
And certain accents, right? Like Boston sometimes drops the R in car. Becomes Kyle.
Exactly. So even when you think you've got the rule, a regional variation can come along and, well, change the game.
Throw a curveball. So is there one last, maybe pro tip for when you're stuck? Not sure if a letter is silent.
Okay. Here's something to try. It's not foolproof, but if you're uncertain about a word, try saying it kind of quickly. Naturally.
Yeah.
Sometimes the way native speakers naturally sort of smooth things out or drop sounds in rapid speech, it can give you a clue.
How so?
Well, think about the word family. Said quickly, it often sounds more like family.
Family, yeah, I hear that.
That middle I gets really reduced, almost disappears. It doesn't mean it's always silent, but it hints that it's a less stressed, potentially droppable sound in casual speech.
Ah, interesting. So listen for the shortcuts people take.
Kind of. It can sometimes offer a subtle hint about which letters are, let's say, less essential to the core pronunciation.
That's a really cool observation. Okay, so to bring this all home, we want to issue a little challenge. For you, our listener, a silent letter spy challenge.
Whoa, intriguing.
Ready to put your new knowledge to the test.
Think of it as your linguistic field mission. It's got 3 parts.
Okay, part 1. Spot the silent.
Right. Just find one word you encounter today or tomorrow that has a silent letter, like thumb with its silent B.
Mm-hmm.
And just try to think back, why might that be silent? Was it a historical leftover? French influence? One of those reasons we discussed?
Okay, spot the silent. Figure out the why.
Uh-huh.
Part 2. Trick a friend.
Yes. In a nice way, obviously.
Obviously.
Ask someone to spell a word that often trips people up, like maybe February, with that silent R sometimes.
Yeah, or is it silent?
Or
maybe restaurant.
See if those sneaky silent letters catch them out.
And finally, part 3. Embrace the chaos.
Embrace the chaos.
Find a word with a truly wonderfully bizarre spelling that includes a silent letter. Something like pterodactyl.
P-T-E-R-O. Yeah, starting with a silent P. Why?
Exactly. Just find one of those and sort of marvel at the beautiful absurdity of English spelling. Just ask why and appreciate the mystery.
Love it. We even have a quick example to kickstart your spy mission. Remember our listener who bravely admitted to saying salmon?
Well, they also mentioned recently figuring out the silence B in subtle.
Ah, subtle. S-U-B-T-L-E.
Right. Apparently, it comes from the Latin word subtilis, meaning fine or thin.
Subtilis.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Knowledge is power.
Even against these silent linguistic ninjas.
So go forth, listeners. Be silent letter spies. You now hopefully have a much better grip on why these uninvited guests are hanging around in our language.
Yeah. And next time you see a word like T-H-O-U-G-H and you feel that little knot of spelling frustration, just remember the Yiki is definitely silent. Take a breath. And hopefully that internal groan will be just a tiny bit quieter.
Join us next time on The Deep Dive when we'll be tackling another really fun aspect of English.
What do we got next time?
We're looking at why English steals so many words and how you can sound like you've known words like, oh, karaoke, schadenfreude, or even emoji forever.
Ooh, that sounds fascinating. Okay, until our next deep dive, happy spelling, everyone, and hopefully slightly less frustrating spelling.